In a quiet town by the lake, a rescued bobcat named Major found a home behind the counter of a small cafe. Each morning, he greets strangers not with a roar, but with a touch, a paw laid gently on a waiting hand. What began as a simple thank you became something far deeper, a bridge between the wild and the human heart. This is the story of how one small gesture reminded an entire town what kindness truly means. Morning mist rolled through Caldwell Station Cafe, curling around the wooden porch like breath from the lake beyond. Inside, the scent of coffee and old pine filled the air. Behind the counter, a shape moved a golden brown bobcat, calm, deliberate, almost regal. Major sat upright on a low wooden stool beside the register, his tufted ears flicking toward every sound. The faint limp in his hind leg told the story of winters survived. Sunlight streamed through the window, striking his fur until it shimmered like amber silk. Jonas Hale wiped the counter with the same care one might polish a memory. He glanced toward Major and smiled. "You ready for the morning rush, partner?" The bobcat blinked slowly, the kind of blink that meant trust. Outside, a bell clanged on the rail yard, echoing through town. To locals, Major wasn't just a rescued animal. He was the cafe's silent greeter, the first to welcome anyone brave enough to meet those wild eyes. Each morning he perched by the register as if guarding an unspoken promise between wilderness and man. Customers came quietly at first, rail workers, fishermen, an old teacher who always ordered black coffee. They'd nod to Jonas, then to the bobcat, as though both were fixtures of the same heartbeat. Major watched every motion, tail curling like a slow metronome. Sometimes he would lower his head near the cup of a newcomer, sniffing the steam, then retreat without sound. No one dared touch him. They didn't need to. His presence was enough a calm assurance that even wild hearts could find peace among humans. Jonas remembered the night he'd found him, half frozen near the tracks, caught in wire and fear. That image still flickered behind every glance he gave the animal. Saving Major had saved something in Jonas too, a quiet reason to open the cafe each dawn. Outside, a train horn moaned across the valley. Major lifted his head, ears pricked, eyes golden against the dim light. The world trembled in that low sound, and yet the bobcat remained still, grounded, as if guarding the warmth inside these walls from the cold beyond. By late morning, laughter mixed with the clatter of spoons. Major shifted positions, curling his paw beneath his chest like a gentleman folding hands. The small limp barely showed, but Jonas noticed it every time, a reminder of how fragile survival could be. Visitors sometimes asked how Jonas managed to keep a wild cat so calm. He would only shrug. "Maybe he keeps me." The truth was simpler. Trust had replaced fear, and routine had built its own kind of wilderness here, fenced not by walls, but by understanding. As sunlight faded to gold, Major leapt gracefully from his stool, padded toward the window, and stared out at the rippling lake. His reflection met his gaze, a creature neither captive nor free, but something in between, perfectly at home for this one quiet moment. When Jonas turned the sign to closed, Major was already curled near the counter's warm light, eyes half closed, tail draped like a question mark. Outside, the last train rumbled past, carrying away the noise of the world. Inside, the bobcat purred once soft, steady, belonging. Morning light pooled across the cafe floor like warm honey, catching dust motes that drifted and vanished. Major held still behind the counter, ears pricked, whiskers tasting the air. He sensed the town waking, doors unlatching, boots on boards, the soft hum of a lake breeze. Clara Wells stepped in with a hush of cool air and the faint perfume of daisies. She set a small bouquet by the register, then placed 2 bills in the tip jar. Major watched the slant of her wrist, the tremor of breath before a smile, the kindness that lived there. He rose from his stool with a careful grace. That slight hitch in his hind leg, barely a shadow. Jonas paused mid-wipe, eyes flicking from cloth to cat. Major stretched, spine rippling, and came forward until the worn edge of the counter grazed his chest. Clara held her palm above the wood, unsure if the space belonged to him. Major leaned closer, not sniffing but reading, as if her hand carried a story only a wild heart could hear. His pupils softened. The cafe noise fell to a velvet hush around them. He lifted his right paw broad, tufted, deliberate, and set it gently upon her open hand. No claws, only weight and warmth, like a stone warmed by sun. Clara's breath hitched, her smile trembled, then settled. Jonas felt the room tilt toward wonder. The touch lasted a heartbeat longer than polite. Major didn't take, didn't ask. He gave presence, a still, living answer to questions she hadn't said aloud. Clara whispered, "Thank you," as if the words might startle him. He blinked once, slow, sovereign. Jonas found himself holding the rag too tight, fingers whitening at the seams. He had seen gratitude before coffee on the house, a hand on a shoulder, but never this quiet ceremony. Major eased his paw back, sat tall again, and the room exhaled as one. Word stitched itself through town, faster than steam leaves a kettle. By noon, regulars drifted in with softer steps, tipping with careful bills, palms hovering near the counter like moths testing light. Major watched, not inviting, not refusing, measuring. He did not repeat the gesture for everyone. A tourist with a loud laugh earned only a curious glance. A logger with sap on his sleeves received a slow, approving blink. Choice, Jonas thought, not a trick, not training choice, like opening a door or closing it. Sun angled lower, turning the polished wood to amber. The lake breeze lingered inside, cool on fur. Major sat again beside the register, regal but relaxed, tail folded into its quiet S. He had learned the room's rhythm, and now the room learned his. Clara returned before dusk with a paper cup of cream he never touched, and a second bouquet he never needed. She lifted her hand as before. Major leaned in, paw hovering, then rested it once more. No crowd, no cameras, only 2 old souls keeping time. When the bell over the door chimed a final sleepy note, Jonas flipped the sign to closed. Major hopped down, padded to his stool, and curled tight. Outside, the lake gathered the last light. Inside, the memory of a wild paw on a human hand kept glowing. By the next week, the small town had changed its rhythm to match the bobcats. People rose earlier, hoping to catch the quiet hour when Major still sat by the register, tail curled like smoke. Outside the cafe, the first footprints pressed into frost-lined boards before sunrise. Jonas pretended to tidy the counter, but his eyes followed the steady stream of faces. Each one carried a mix of reverence and curiosity. They came for coffee, yes, but more than that, they came for a moment with the creature who seemed to see through them. Earl Donovan arrived with a plank of polished pine balanced on his shoulder. "Figure he needs a proper post," he said, nodding toward Major. The bobcat blinked once, unbothered by the scent of sawdust. Jonas smiled, grateful for the old man's way of caring without words. By noon, Earl had finished it a small wooden stand, rounded edges, fitted perfectly beside the counter. Major stepped onto it that afternoon, as if it had always been his. The crowd hushed, waiting for something miraculous. He only sat, proud and still, his eyes half closed in peace. Clara Wells watched from the window seat, her bouquet resting on her lap. She noticed how Major studied each visitor, his gaze slow and deliberate, never startled. "He chooses," she murmured to Jonas. "Not everyone gets that poor." Jonas nodded, understanding more than he said. The logger returned, the one with sap-stained sleeves. He left a folded note under his cup. "Thank you for reminding me what gentleness looks like." Jonas found it after closing, heart tightening at the thought that maybe this animal was teaching them all. Major adjusted to the attention as if he'd been born to manage it. When the bell above the door rang, he looked up, scanning tone and posture before relaxing again. A soft meow, barely audible, sometimes escaped him, but never for show. It was his way of acknowledging calm. One afternoon, a tourist leaned too close, phone raised. Major turned his head sharply, gaze hardening. The visitor froze, muttered an apology, and backed away. Jonas exhaled. "He's not a pet," he said gently. The room nodded in quiet agreement. Respect had been earned. Earl returned a few days later to sand the edges smoother. Major supervised from his stool, one paw hanging over the wood as if approving. "Looks like he runs the place," Earl chuckled. Jonas answered, "Maybe he does." The air smelled of cedar, comfort, and trust. A week later, a light rain began to fall outside, tapping the windows like fingers. Major rose, stretched long, and placed his paw softly on Jonas's hand before curling up again. No reason, no reward, just a reminder that the bond went both ways. By dusk, the crowd had thinned to locals again. The cafe glowed golden, quiet laughter fading under the hum of the espresso machine. Major slept near the counter, chest rising steady, tail flicking once in dream. Jonas dimmed the lights, smiling toward him. "Good night, partner." Outside, the wet street reflected the sign's faint light. Inside, the old pine floor creaked as Major stirred in his sleep. As if even dreaming, he was listening. The town breathed around him, held together by one small creature who asked for nothing but peace. The story of the bobcat behind the counter spread farther than Jonas ever imagined. A week after Earl's wooden stand was finished, A van rolled into town with the logo of a local news station. Its antenna gleamed in the morning sun like a spear pointed straight at their peace. Inside the cafe, Major sat in his usual place, tail resting neatly over his paws. He sensed the change before the door even opened. Voices too sharp, energy too fast. Jonas felt it too, that subtle tightening in the air. "Easy," he murmured to the cat, though the words were mostly for himself. Lydia Carr entered first, camera bag slung over her shoulder, her smile bright but practiced. "Morning, Mr. Hale. I hear you have quite the employee." Jonas chuckled softly, trying to keep the tone light. Major only stared, eyes gold and steady, measuring the stranger. They set up the camera near the window where the light was warmest. Customers whispered at their tables, unsure whether to stay or leave. Lydia crouched near the counter, careful but fascinated. "May I offer him something?" she asked. Jonas nodded once, slow and firm. "If he lets you." She extended a hand with a small treat, palm open. Major watched her, body still, whiskers trembling once. Then, with deliberate grace, he lifted his paw and placed it upon her fingers. Gasps rippled through the room. Lydia's eyes widened, a sheen of honest emotion breaking her composure. "This isn't just a story," she whispered, forgetting the camera for a heartbeat. "He knows what he's doing." Major held the moment longer than usual, then withdrew, blinking as if to say the interview was over. Jonas felt a lump in his throat. He'd seen the power of that gesture before. By noon, the segment was filmed and the crew gone, leaving the cafe oddly hollow. Major sat beside his stand, gaze distant, as though sensing the echo of lenses. Jonas brewed another pot, his hands slower than usual. "We'll keep it small," he said, though deep down he knew it wouldn't stay that way. The next morning, the parking lot was full before sunrise. Families with cameras, travelers with tripods, locals curious and proud. Major perched behind the counter, ears flattening under the weight of attention. A child reached toward him before Jonas could intervene. The bobcat stepped back, silent warning. Clara arrived mid-morning, concern etched in her gentle face. "It's too much," she said quietly. Jonas nodded. He's trying to be polite, but even Major's patience had edges. When flashes popped, he lowered his head and turned away, pupils narrow slits of fatigue. Earl came by in the afternoon, carrying a small sign he'd carved. "No photos during quiet hours." He nailed it near the door without a word. Major watched him work, eyes softening a little. Jonas exhaled, gratitude heavy in his chest. At least someone understood boundaries. When the cafe finally emptied, the air felt thin. Major jumped down, pacing once before settling under a chair. Jonas crouched beside him. "You did good," he whispered. Major's eyes met his, tired but trusting. He reached out, paw resting against Jonas's sleeve, a silent plea for calm. Outside, twilight bled through clouds, painting the lake in bruised gold. Jonas locked the door and turned off the lights. Inside, Major lay still beneath the counter, his tail twitching once before sleep. The fame had come fast, but the cost had only begun to show. By the next week, The peace inside Caldwell Station Cafe began to unravel. Crowds gathered before dawn, voices echoing through the glass. Major stayed behind the counter, motionless, his fur bristling under the steady hum of phones and whispered excitement. Jonas tried to manage the flow, asking guests to speak softly, to wait their turn. But excitement made people careless. Children pressed their hands against the counter. Adults leaned in too close, flashes bursting like small storms around the bobcat's calm face. At first, Major endured it. He sat tall, eyes steady, letting the noise wash over him. But when the crowd grew dense, the energy shifted. He twitched, tail lashing once, a silent warning. Jonas saw it instantly, the look that meant he was reaching his limit. One visitor ignored the unspoken rule. A young man in a bright jacket laughed, snapping photos from inches away. Major flinched, ears flattening, his paw striking the air between them. The man stumbled back, startled, no harm done, but the cafe fell into absolute silence. Jonas rushed forward, voice calm but firm, ushering the man outside. "That's enough for today," he said, locking the door behind him. Major stood frozen, chest heaving, eyes sharp and bright. His wildness was showing, not dangerous, only honest. Within hours, the story spread faster than steam. "Bobcat attacks tourist," the headlines read. Pictures flashed across screens, stripped of truth. Jonas sat in the darkened cafe, phone buzzing, heart heavy. Major lay beneath the counter, breathing slow, unaware of the uproar. Deputy Ross arrived that evening, hat in hand. "I saw the post," he said quietly. "No charges, just noise." Jonas nodded, exhausted. Major lifted his head, meeting Ross's gaze with quiet dignity. "He didn't attack," Jonas murmured. "He defended his space." The deputy crouched, close but careful. "Then let's make sure he keeps it," he said. They drafted a plan, limited hours, smaller crowds, privacy restored. Jonas posted a handwritten sign on the door. "Closed until further notice. Thank you for understanding." That night, the cafe felt hollow. Jonas brewed coffee he didn't drink, the scent mixing with rain seeping through old windows. Major padded out from under the counter, limping slightly, and rested his paw on Jonas's wrist. The touch steadied them both. Outside, rain turned to sleet, clattering against the roof like scattered applause. Inside, the man and the bobcat sat in quiet reflection, two beings bound by exhaustion and trust. Jonas whispered, "I'll fix this." Major blinked once, as if believing him. By morning, the town had turned protective. Locals gathered outside with signs, "Respect the bobcat, no photos, just peace." Through the window, Major watched them, tail flicking once, his golden eyes softening. The storm had shown them all who he really was, wild, kind, and deeply human in his own silent way. Rain had not stopped for 2 straight days, turning the gravel roads to grey rivers. Inside the closed cafe, the lights stayed dim. Jonas worked quietly, repairing shelves, glancing toward the counter where Major should have been. The stool sat empty, fur clinging to its edge. He called softly, the way he always did at morning, "Major." his voice low, almost breaking. Only the sound of rain answered. The bobcat's paw prints ended near the back porch, where wind had scattered pine needles. Jonas's chest tightened. He knew that look of leaving. He searched through the drizzle, coat soaked, breath fogging in the cold. Every rustle made him turn. He checked the rail yard, the old shed, even the thicket by the lake where they once walked at dawn. Nothing. The world had swallowed his companion in silence. By dusk, the storm deepened. Deputy Ross arrived, boots splashing through puddles. "We'll keep looking," he said, voice heavy. They followed faint prints until darkness erased them. Jonas stood at the tree line, shouting once more, the name lost to wind and water. That night he left the back door open, a lantern burning inside. The smell of wet cedar filled the cafe. He sat at the counter, head bowed, replaying the past weeks, the crowds, the noise, the fear he hadn't stopped in time. The chair beside him stayed empty. Morning brought fog so thick it blurred the world. Jonas walked again to the lake, his boots sinking in mud. Then he saw it a ripple, a shape beneath the willow branches. Major lay curled beneath the roots, fur matted, sides rising faintly with breath. Jonas dropped to his knees, whispering his name. Major stirred, eyes dull but alive. He tried to stand and failed, a soft whimper leaving his throat. Jonas lifted him carefully, wrapping his coat around that familiar weight. "I've got you now," he murmured. Back inside, he dried the bobcat with old towels, lighting the stove for warmth. Major's paws trembled. His ears flicked weakly at each crackle of flame. Jonas brewed warm milk, holding the cup near him, not forcing, only waiting. Major blinked once in thanks. Dr. Milton Gray arrived soon after, shaking off rain. He examined the bobcat in silence. "He's dehydrated and scared," he said. "Keep him quiet. Keep him near." Major's eyes followed the doctor's movements, calm but wary, as though recognizing the voice of care. That evening, as the storm eased, Major crawled closer to Jonas's chair. His paw reached out, resting lightly on Jonas's arm. It was the same gesture he gave strangers, now meant for one person only. Jonas covered it with his hand, whispering, "You're safe, old friend." When night returned, the cafe felt alive again. The hum of the stove, the scent of pine, the rhythmic rain outside, all of it wrapping them in fragile peace. Major slept at Jonas's feet, chest rising steady, tail flicking once like a promise kept. Outside, the storm broke completely, leaving the streets silver under the moon. Inside, two silhouettes shared the soft light of survival. For the first time in weeks, Jonas smiled. Major was home again, not a spectacle, not a story, just a life reclaimed from the storm. At least someone understood boundaries. When the cafe finally emptied, the air felt thin. Major jumped down, pacing once before settling under a chair. Jonas crouched beside him. "You did good," he whispered. Major's eyes met his, tired but trusting. He reached out, paw resting against Jonas's sleeve, a silent plea for calm. Outside, twilight bled through clouds, painting the lake in bruised gold. Jonas locked the door and turned off the lights. Inside, Major lay still beneath the counter, his tail twitching once before sleep. The fame had come fast, but the cost had only begun to show. The rain was gone, leaving the air washed clean and thin. The cafe smelled of wood smoke and new beginnings. Jonas moved slowly through the morning routine, setting cups on the counter. Beside him, Major stretched, his fur sleek again, his eyes alert but quieter than before. Jonas spoke softly, as if afraid to break the calm. "No more crowds, partner. We'll do this on our own time." Major blinked once, slow and sure, then leapt onto his wooden stand. He sat tall, watching the empty door, content to let the silence breathe again. A handwritten sign now hung near the entrance. Open by heart, not by schedule. Locals understood. They came one by one, not to take pictures, but to sip coffee and speak softly. Major greeted them from a distance, sometimes with a paw lifted, sometimes with a steady gaze. Clara Wells arrived carrying a single lily instead of a bouquet. "For peace," she said. Major sniffed the flower, his whiskers twitching. For the first time since the storm, he purred not loud, but deep and steady, a sound that filled the small cafe like a hymn. Deputy Ross stopped by later, nodding to Jonas. "Town's quiet again. People finally learned what respect looks like." Major looked up from his stool, meeting the deputy's gaze with calm recognition. Ross smiled. "Guess we all got taught by the same teacher." That afternoon, Dr. Milton Gray returned to check on Major. "Strong heartbeat," he said, running his hands gently along the healed scars. Major stayed still, eyes half closed. "He's grounded," the doctor added, "but keep things slow. He's earned his peace." Jonas nodded in silence. As evening settled, Jonas sat at the counter, ledger open but untouched. Major jumped down, padding to his side. The man's hand brushed against fur, rough against soft. "I owe you more than I can say," he whispered. Major pressed his head against Jonas's knee in reply. The next morning, the cafe door creaked open without a sound. No bell rang. Only one person entered, a woman in traveling clothes with tired eyes. Jonas poured coffee before she asked. Major watched her closely, sensing something fragile beneath her stillness. She smiled faintly at the bobcat. "He's the one, isn't he? The miracle." Jonas only said, "He just knows when to listen." Major stepped closer, his paw lifting slightly but not yet touching. The woman closed her eyes, and for a moment the room seemed to pause with her. Outside, wind rustled through birch leaves, scattering sunlight across the floor. Major turned toward it, gaze steady, as if seeing the world for the first time again. Jonas watched, realizing the cat no longer lived behind the counter. He lived in every quiet heart that entered. That night, Jonas wrote a single line in his journal. "Peace begins with a paw and patience." Major slept near the stove, tail curled like a comma in an unfinished sentence. The story wasn't done, but for now, it had found its rhythm again. In the stillness before dawn, Jonas woke to the soft sound of claws on wood. Major had climbed back onto his stand, sitting tall, eyes fixed on the door. The first light touched his fur, and for a heartbeat, the cafe glowed gold again. balance had returned. Morning returned like a whisper. Mist rolled off the lake and into town, brushing the windows of Caldwell Station Cafe. Inside, Major perched on his stand again, eyes bright, fur sleek. The scent of roasted beans and wood smoke mingled with the quiet heartbeat of a place rebuilt. Jonas wiped the counter, glancing at the sign that now read, "Quiet hours, always welcome." The town had changed with the cat voices softer, steps slower. Major's presence had become a kind of ritual. People came not to be amazed, but to feel calm settle into their bones. That morning, a stranger entered, an older woman in a grey coat, hair pulled back, face drawn with loss. She ordered tea and sat near the window, hands trembling slightly as she unfolded an old photograph. Major's gaze followed her movements, unblinking and patient. Jonas poured her tea without a word. The woman nodded but didn't look up. Major tilted his head, reading something invisible in the way her shoulders curved inward. He leapt down silently and walked toward her, paws soundless against the wood. She froze as the bobcat stopped beside her table, her lips parted, eyes glassy. "I didn't mean to cry," she whispered. Major raised one paw, setting it lightly on her sleeve. The world seemed to hold its breath. Jonas stopped moving behind the counter. The woman's tears came quietly. She looked at the animal through them, seeing not danger but understanding. "I lost him last winter," she said, voice breaking. "I still wait for him every morning." Major didn't move, only pressed his paw once more, firm and kind. When she finally smiled, a small, trembling smile, Major withdrew and returned to his stand. Jonas exhaled, realizing the cafe had gone utterly still. "You've got a gift, my friend," he murmured. Major blinked once, then turned his face toward the light again. Clara Wells arrived later and heard the story. "Helen Drake," she said softly, recognizing the woman's name. "Her husband ran the ferry before the lake froze. She hasn't spoken to anyone in months." Jonas nodded. "She spoke to him," he said, eyes on the cat. For the rest of the day, visitors came and went quietly, leaving small things, a folded note, a flower, a smooth stone on the counter. Each one, it seemed, wanted to leave behind something gentle, a reminder of the calm they'd found there. Major watched it all, serene. At sunset, Helen returned. She stood by the door for a long time before stepping in. Major hopped down again, slow and steady. This time, she knelt beside him. "Thank you," she whispered. He lowered his head until his forehead touched her hand. The cafe glowed with peace. When the evening closed in, Jonas turned off the lights. Major remained near the window, eyes reflecting the soft blue of twilight. Outside, the lake shimmered with calm ripples. Inside, a wild heart kept watch, guarding not a place, but the quiet, healing it had made. That night, Jonas wrote in his ledger again. He doesn't just greet them anymore. He finds the broken ones and helps them remember they're still whole. Major slept by the door, his breath deep and slow, waiting for whoever might need him next. Winter faded slowly, replaced by a soft gold light that wrapped the town in quiet warmth. The cafe reopened its doors to gentle mornings again. Major sat on his stand like a sentinel, fur glinting in the sun. eyes steady, as if guarding the peace they had earned together. Jonas brewed the first pot of coffee, glancing toward his silent companion. "Back to normal," he said softly. Major blinked once, deliberate and calm. Yet there was something different in the way he watched the door, an awareness that life, once broken, had mended itself. Word about the cafe spread again, but this time differently. There were no reporters, no flashes, just travelers drawn by whispers of kindness. They entered quietly, leaving heavy things at the door. Major greeted them not with a trick, but with stillness that said, "You're safe here." Deputy Ross arrived one morning, removing his hat at the threshold. "Looks peaceful again," he said with a half smile. Major rose, stretching, his tail flicking once before he settled back down. Ross chuckled. "That cat could teach this town about patience." Jonas nodded. "He already has." A mother and an older man came in later, speaking softly about someone they'd lost. They didn't notice Major approach until his paw brushed the man's sleeve. Tears came uninvited. Jonas didn't interrupt. He'd learned that silence often healed faster than words ever could. By late afternoon, the cafe carried a hum of quiet gratitude. Locals left notes in a small jar near the counter, words of thanks, hope, remembrance. Major watched each person as if memorizing their stories, as if the act of seeing them made them whole again. Earl Donovan carved a new wooden plaque for the counter, simple and clean, one paw at a time. He set it beside Major's stand and wiped the dust away with a sleeve. "He's done more good than most preachers," he said. Jonas laughed softly. "And with fewer sermons, Clara Wells brought wild flowers from the hills, placing them beside the sign. He finds the right people," she said. Major leaned toward her, sniffing the petals, tail curling neatly around his feet. His golden eyes reflected the quiet gratitude around him. As the sun dropped behind the pines, the cafe glowed amber. A gentle wind carried the scent of coffee and cedar into the street. People walking by slowed their steps just to look inside. Through the window, they saw the bobcat sitting still, symbol of grace and survival. That night, Jonas closed early. He sat near the door. The world hushed except for the ticking clock. Major padded over and rested beside his chair. Jonas whispered, "You've changed this town, you know." Major blinked slowly, his gaze soft but infinite. Outside, the lake caught the moonlight like silver glass. Inside, the cafe pulsed with warmth. For everyone who entered, the bobcat's calm had become a quiet ritual of healing. It wasn't fame anymore, it was faith in the simple act of being seen. Before dawn, Jonas found Major already awake, sitting by the window. His reflection shimmered beside the first light. The town slept on, but the cafe breathed with quiet life. Major lifted his head slightly, ears twitching. Another day of peace was waiting, one paw at a time. The first snow of the year came quietly, falling in soft spirals that wrapped the cafe in silver light. Inside, the fire crackled low, casting warmth across the floorboards. Major sat near the window, older now, fur streaked with pale grey, but his eyes still bright with calm knowing. Jonas watched him from behind the counter, his hands slower these days. "4 winters, partner," he murmured, pouring coffee for no one in particular. Major blinked once, tail curling neatly around his paws. The bond between them no longer needed words, it breathed on its own. The mornings were quieter now. The crowd had thinned to a few faithful souls. Clara with her flowers, Earl with his steady grin, and Ross stopping by to leave fresh firewood. Each of them paused by Major's stand, touching the carved sign that read, "One paw at a time." Dr. Milton Gray visited one frosty afternoon. He knelt beside the bobcat, running a practiced hand over the familiar scars. "He's slower," he said gently. Jonas nodded, his eyes damp but steady. "So am I." Major's ears flicked, as if scolding them both for their pity. That night, the cafe closed early. Snow thickened outside, muting the world. Jonas read by the fire, the pages trembling slightly in his hands. Major slept near the stove, breathing soft, the rhythm even and slow. For the first time, Jonas feared the silence might outlast them. At dawn, a pale light broke through the storm. Jonas woke to the sound of claws on wood. Major had climbed back onto his stand. He sat tall, fur brushed smooth, gaze turned toward the door. The bell above it swayed though no one had entered. It felt like waiting. Clara arrived with a handful of winter lilies, her breath forming clouds in the cold air. "For him," she whispered. Major lifted his head, eyes meeting hers, then lowered them again. Jonas placed the flowers beside the counter. "He knows," he said softly. "He always does." And first, by afternoon, the cafe filled with familiar faces. No one spoke loudly. They came with gifts, notes, candles, warm bread offering thanks for years of quiet grace. Major stayed on his stand, calm and regal. His gaze moved across each face as though blessing them in silence. When the crowd faded, Jonas pulled up a chair beside him. "You've done your work," he said. Major's paw reached out, resting on his sleeve. The old gesture was slower now, but the meaning had deepened. Jonas covered it with his hand, eyes wet in the firelight. Evening fell like a sigh. Major curled near Jonas's feet, tail wrapped tight. His breathing slowed, chest rising, falling, pausing. Jonas whispered his name once more, but Major only stirred, head pressing faintly against his boot before settling again in peace. By morning, the snow had stopped. The cafe stood still, golden in the early sun. Jonas sat by the counter, eyes red but smiling. The stand was empty now, except for a few scattered paw prints and a single lily petal caught in the grain of the wood. Outside, townspeople gathered quietly, laying flowers at the window. Inside, Jonas lit the stove, the warmth spilling out to meet the cold. On the counter, the sign remained, one paw at a time, and in that simple phrase, Major's spirit lingered gentle, steadfast, forever home. If this story touched your heart, just drop a 1 in the comments, or a 0 if it stayed quiet inside you. Don't forget to subscribe. There are more gentle stories waiting just beyond the trees.